So why don't we stay in the circle, but how about moving in a little bit closer? Does that work?
Yeah.
I'm not going to move.
I would like to keep the corridor of the camera clear of people. So
Okay. That's good. Yeah. Are you comfortable? If you're not, you can change where you're sitting or the setup of what you're sitting on. So, there are other chairs actually in those window seats, and there are cushions back there behind the piano. So if you want something to be different, this isn't about endurance. Well, not that kind anyway. You could also, do you want a cushion for the chair?
I'm fine with it.
It's probably too big. I think there might be more of those in those things if you want to look. I don't know for sure what's, oh look, Lee has one. Oh, back up a little, yeah, nice, yeah. Okay. How lucky we are to have just gotten to eat. When you think of how much of the planet is not taking lunch for granted. So, why don't you shut your eyes? Or, if you want to meditate with your eyes open, there's nothing magic about shutting your eyes unless you find it is helpful. Meditation is just being still inside. And you can be perfectly still inside while your eyes are taking in what's in the field of vision. Light can come into your pupils with images without you labeling what you see or making a story about it, or having any sort of opinion about it. Your mind can be just as busy with your eyes closed as with your eyes open. So you might try it now or sometime. After all, at some point, when freedom comes, won't you be meditating all day long while you're in motion with your eyes open? Even hurrying physically, but utterly still inside. Just in the now. And knowing you're in the now. You're not in the now, you are the now. In fact, sometimes when you let the senses have a deep drink of whatever they're able to sense, that's exactly what makes your mind go quiet. And let your body be completely at ease with itself. Feel what's there. This is all you've got. It's everything. Whatever is right now in your awareness is all you've got. It's all you are. If you're making a distinction between sound that might be in your head and sound that's out there somewhere, look again. It's all sound. If you have a preference for one over the other, just see that preference is there. If your eyes are closed, when you feel ready, open them, please. And look around the room at us. Why are we so afraid of each other? Afraid of ourselves, I guess. Do you ever look at the mirror at yourself for a long time? Not looking for the imperfections like the wrinkle, the gray, but looking the way maybe you were looking into that other person's eyes earlier, and they were looking into yours. Who is that in there? If I were to ask you to make the sound of relief. If I said to you, by some miracle, starting right now, you could completely rest from all the effort the rest of your life, what kind of sound would you make? Go ahead and make it. Okay. Okay. Which, so when you look at the effort, let's just look at it, feel the effort you expend. I mean, it's a miracle we don't die every day, just from exhaustion. And do we ever question the effort? I mean, it looks like it's the effort to pay the bills and keep the kids in the car together, and but that's actually a minor point, really. The effort of maintenance, constantly looking before and after in time, maintenance of the self, feeling okay about yourself, and oh my God. Do you ever question it? I mean, never mind questioning it. Just realize the extent of it. And you actually, I'll tell you, and maybe you know what I'm talking about, you don't know how much effort you're expending until it stops. You think you do, but you don't know the tenth of it. That's what's really poignant. So, what is the maintenance that's going on all the time? We actually work unconsciously very hard to keep going the impression that we are what our minds tell us we are. We're our absolute own worst enemies in this regard. It's like there's a structure. The situation we're in an ongoing way, that keeps us from being able to finally completely rest, is that we're keeping going the seeming reality of three things. They all depend on each other. And if any one of them takes a hit, chances are there's going to be some big shift. But you can't make this into a method. One of them is belief in the reality of time. That time has an existence independent of my thinking about something in it. Do you know what I'm saying? The mind cannot, you will not talk your mind into this because it thought it up in the first place. So don't try. But when you're having an experience in the now, which is the only time you can have an experience, that's one thing. Any experience that you can remember or anticipate is of a different order of reality, big quotation marks. Even if it really did happen, or even if you know it's going to happen. Now, what do we know is going to happen? We're going to die. That's about it. The rest is conjecture. But we do know we're going to die. The fact that I know I'm going to die doesn't make my death real now, does it? It's a thought. So don't fall into the trap of saying, well, if it's a thing that really is going to happen, or a thing that really did happen, somehow it's real now. It's a thought. If you couldn't think the thought, but we don't remember habitually that anything that appears to be in time, which is to say not the now, asks us to go into our mind to think. We project constantly, pretty constantly, that time has an existence independent of our thinking about it. And the ongoing inability to know what we deeply are depends, among other things, upon our keeping that illusion going. That time is just as real as the now. That's why we manage to be in our heads. Because the content of what we're thinking that has to do with either some other moment or some other place, maybe right now, but elsewhere, that all seems so real that we engage with it as if it's just as real as the feel of the floor under the foot. The second thing we have to keep believing is real is that there is an ongoing self that each of us is. Something, what does ongoing mean? It means it has a continuity from one moment to the next. When I ask you, who are you? And you answer in the ordinary way, which is the way it's what we generally believe we actually are. You give your biography, or I look at you and I see physical traits, and you say, well, I'm a woman, I'm old, I'm fat, I'm, or... What if you literally couldn't remember any of your stories? Well, then who are you? So, the self that we think of ourselves as being needs time to be real in order to compute. Do you see this? And that is all going on in the head. If I ask you to experience, if I say, what can you directly experience of you, of yourself? All you have is momentary sensation. All you have is something about the physical right now. That's all you can directly experience of yourself. You cannot directly experience that you are a survivor, a Democrat. You have to go into your head for any of that to compute. What you, if there's some you, are, is constantly in flux. The ego doesn't like that, of course. The ego that can be afraid of its own death really doesn't like that. If you don't go into your mind and turn it on and revisit content there somewhere. Who am I? What are my views about things? What significant things have happened in my life? And you're left with momentary, immediate sensation, feeling, encounter, physical movement. Like, what does it mean to be you? If the now is all we have, it's also all we have of ourselves. Do you see this? And the third thing we have to keep believing in the reality of is thought, which you already see how crucial it is. Time can't exist without thought. It doesn't exist. It appears to exist to the mind. So the exhaustion we feel in an ongoing way is to keep each of these things, the self, thought, and time, seeming real, even though deeply we know they're not. So it's like walking up a mountain of sand all day long to keep this thing going. So if something happens, say to your sense of time, when you have an experience in which time is said to stop, do you know what I mean? Something shocking happens, or something so beautiful, visually beautiful, that you're singing, you're listening to somebody else sing, or you're out there in the world. Something happens where utter stillness saturates your awareness. Stops all thought. Don't you know at a moment like that time doesn't exist? Don't you know that? I don't mean know it with your mind, but when the impression of time being real starts up again, there's a difference. You notice it. Which one of those feels more real? And some people have this kind of experience, and they remember it. And there's a little chink after that. Your sense of yourself being real in this continuous kind of way. I know who I am. Something happens in your life, your identity, like the job you've had for 40 years and you've been really good at. And it's how people know you, and it's what you pride yourself on. Suddenly, the bottom falls out from under it. Or you have say you're very beautiful, very physically capable, very youthful, you look much younger than you are. Something happens, you're in a terrible accident, and you're in a wheelchair, or you're disfigured, and suddenly the identity that had so much to do with your physical beauty or well-being can't hold up anymore. It's crushed. And then, only then do you know that you're not your body. Something you've always believed to be true, for instance. Or you had a guru, this is a great one, a teacher that you absolutely trusted and loved, who turns out to be, bad, corrupt. Or you found out the man you always, the mother, let's see, what was this an actual experience of this, the woman that you always thought was your sister, your older sister, turns out to be your mother, who gave birth to you when she was 15, and her mother raised you as her own. So you lost a sister and a mother in this discovery. Something that so profoundly undoes your sense of who you are. When something like that happens, it often feels like an absolute nightmare. But you see how it can so undo your sense of who you are or what you think is reliable. It can actually be a door to freedom. And who would have ever expected that? So short of one of those transformative underpinnings, all day long, every day, we work to keep ourselves believing that our thoughts are reality itself, and that we have a continuity that moves day to day to month to year in time, which is apparently real. Being, or let's say, knowing that you're in the now is an antidote to all of that. When you're aware of when you're conscious, when you're aware of this moment and that you are it, there's no sense of movement of time. Your mind is quiet. So you can't talk yourself out of time seeming real, because it's your mind trying to talk you out of it. You can't go at this, you can't look at it like it's a problem and then go after it and try to dismantle it. You can see the thing functioning, though. You can see, in a moment when you're conscious, you can see how these things keep themselves going. You can see what you're actually doing to... How much of the time do you think about something in the past or the future? It's constant. So what happens when you become conscious in a moment? What happens when you become aware of this, of something of this maintenance going on? Why do you notice it sometimes, and sometimes you're sound asleep? And that's what these things back here are looking at. Something in us is capable of seeing in a neutral way that's absolutely without emotional charge or without any attempt to change anything. Something in us can be that. We're not in charge of when it occurs, but when it does, then it becomes possible to see what the ego is doing, or has been doing very recently. So, in the beginning, for instance, like maybe for the first few decades of your life, resistance, for instance, is a habitual thing. It doesn't occur to you not to resist. It doesn't even occur to you to notice that you're resisting, although you do feel the pain of it. At some point, something causes, and maybe it's because you're sick to death of hurting, or maybe you just begin to wonder, maybe you begin to see how the outer stuff is one thing, but what you tell yourself about it is an independent thing, and that this is what causes you to hurt. Whatever happens, something brings periodic episodes of consciousness into the picture. And that's an indication that there's more to you than the thinker. And the more that occurs, and you're not in charge of it happening more, except when you start to resist something and then you become conscious and you go, oh yeah, and you feel the resistance back off and there's an alleviation of pain, that must be reinforcing, right? There's a relief there. So probably these things do get more so, easier, better over time. And so the things that you see, it's like the more you see, the more you become capable of seeing. You all, I'm sure you've all experienced this. In some ways it gets easier, it gets better. But it's not cumulative. It's not like you're learning more and more and more. When consciousness is coming more into the picture, and you see something, and you really get it in a way that you didn't before. Before it was only mental. You're not any longer who you were before. It's not, and then you become equipped for other things to be seen. And then it's like, this is a story about how the past just keeps dropping off. What you were keeps dropping off. So it's not like you keep learning more and more and more, or getting better and better and better. Your experience of life probably gets softer. You probably do become, you probably suffer less, right? Isn't this, do you know what I'm talking about? And so it can look like, oh, I must be moving closer toward awakening. And remember, the capacity that's been there all along, which you seem to be moving toward, is the very thing that enables you to see the things you're seeing. I don't mean seeing things in an egoic, mental way. I mean seeing things in that neutral, absolutely clear way. So it looks like you're moving toward waking up, but all that's really happening is the awakeness is leaking in more often or more easily into your present moment experience, so that the ego isn't running the show as absolutely as it did before. But it can look like that self, the egoic self, is waking up. That's not what's happening. What's happening is sometimes it's seeming less like who you are. You're taking it less seriously. It's not improving. Which is why you hear sometimes, or maybe experience this. Somebody goes from being deep in ego to waking up just like that. It's not like their egoic self all of a sudden improved really fast. It's that something happened to cause the ego to no longer seem real to them, seem who they are. The thing in us that wants to get better, that wants to make progress, it feels like it is doing better. You see? It's like you're what people say is, I feel like I came home. It's familiar. I knew this. So, when something's happening in your awareness or in your behavior, like sometimes you'll hear yourself say something, or you'll see reflected in somebody else's expression, or you're in a conversation, suddenly you become aware of something that you're doing that is defensive or feeling fragile or asserting yourself, like there's a whole lot riding on what you're doing. You're trying to push yourself out there some way to make something happen or to make an impression or to control something. When you see that you're doing that, see that you're doing it, you get a window into how hard you work to keep yourself going. You can either go with it the way you've been going with it and try really hard to make that whole thing happen, or you can see what you're doing. You need to be able to see yourself in motion just as vividly as somebody who knows you well sees you. You know how it's sort of a cliche among people who know somebody else well. The family members all know this person, or their friends all know this person. You're one of those group people. You all know something about that person that he or she does not know about him or herself. It's completely obvious to everybody else that this person is defensive or angry, or, do you know what I mean? Well, guess what? Each of us has stuff like that too, that everybody around us knows. They could all talk about it, and they may talk about it with one another. When you become as see-through to yourself as you are to other people who know you really well, without judging it, then you begin to get a sense of how you keep this whole thing going. So, let the times that you get defensive or scared to death, I'm talking about in social situations, or you get on your high horse, ranting and raving about something. Or you have a story that defines you on a very deep level, some horror you were subjected to when you were a child. And then you encounter somebody else who has a similar story, and you feel, oh, it's so good to be with this person. Somebody really gets this. But then the one-upmanship starts. You find out that they think they suffered more than you did, and and you think, oh, all this kind of stuff goes on. Let that kind of thing ring a little bell in you. Depends on how much you want to be done with agony. If I'm feeling defensive, or if I have my feelings hurt, and I then become conscious and I recoil from it, I think, oh, I shouldn't be. I have lost a wonderful opportunity. It's like a gem, it's like a jewel. If I can look at it, look at my defensiveness, or look at the fact that I've had my feelings hurt, and ask, what is this about? What does this show me? What is this shining light on about me that matters so very much that I'll protect it at all costs? You don't have to, what is it to look at this? Remember Rumi's field beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. What is it to look at it, to be real with yourself, observe it as a phenomenon without wincing at it or telling yourself it shouldn't be happening? It is happening. This is how something starts to really happen. But if you look away from it, or you busy yourself feeling bad about it, or judging yourself, all it does is dig it in. It's like the wheels spinning in the soft mud. And if there are things in there, places you just don't want to go, things you can't stand to look at about yourself, realize you're looking away. At least realize you're looking away. And maybe you're just not ready to go there yet. That doesn't mean you never will be. But if you realize there's a thing in the closet and you're keeping the door shut with all of your energy, at some point you might just let the door open. Because your sense of what you are is in there. And it's exhausting to avoid it. It's more exhausting to avoid it than it is to surrender to it. And just see what it has to show you. So I think we should write. What a good idea. And just to say up front, I'm not going to ask you to read this. to anybody but yourself. Yeah, I guess we'll write here, or if you want to go someplace else to write, I'll ring the gong when we're going to come back together. Then something else will happen. Here's my idea. And I will say, if you feel pulled mightily to write about something else, then that's what you should write about. But here's an idea. Just sit quietly before you start and let yourself like a plumb line that's being dropped down into a well, and this is down into your own well. Feel where you feel most tender, most fragile, the thing that you're most inclined to defend yourself against, where you tend to get your feelings hurt, where anger flares up. Let yourself feel that kind of feeling, and if it helps you to visualize the kind of circumstance that will stir it, do that. And then write in the voice of the one that's been wounded. Don't pretty it up. Really let it rip. However pitiful or angry or terrified the voice might be, write in that voice until it's spent, until you've said it all. And we'll do this for, half hour. And I'll ring the gong 5 minutes before we're gonna come back here. And if you need a bathroom break, please do it during that time also.